Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of League Chat with the Stat. Thank you for joining me on another great episode this week. As you guys know, we are covering the four-part series on every team in the 2020 season. We're also covering how they went and what they're going to be, what we're expecting from them this year. Look, very excited to cover these four teams coming up in this episode. So last week, as you know, we covered 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th. And this week we'll be covering 9th to 12th. Now, the teams we're covering this week, the St. George Illawarra Dragons, the West Tigers, the New Zealand Warriors, and the Gold Coast Titans. Now, these four teams in particular, I've got to say I'm very intrigued to see how they'll go this year. A lot of new recruits in some of these sides and different changes with their spines as well. So, look, let's get straight into it. Good to be back for another week, guys. Thank you so much once again for joining me. Now, moving on to the first team we're going to be covering is the St. George Illawarra Dragons. Now, they've signed a few players in Jack Bird from the Broncos, Daniel Alvaro from the Eels, Pawasa Famawasili, from the Roosters, and Andrew Mccallick from the Brisbane Broncos. They have lost, however, quite a bit of experience. They've lost Tyson Frizzell to the Knights, James Graham to, he was now retired, but went to St. Helens and won the trophy there. Ewan Aiken went to the Warriors, Jacob Host went to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, Corbin Sims went to Hull Kingston Rovers, Jason Saab went to the Sea Eagles, and Joe Lovadua and Tristan Saylor are released. Now, in the last episode, you can recall that 3 of the 4 teams that we discussed had changing coaches. And look, same case here for the St. George Illawarra Dragons. They have had another change in coach, and now they've got Anthony Griffin. Now, obviously, as you guys know, Paul McGregor got sacked last year, and Dean Young came in and filled in for the rest of the year. Dean Young opted to take up an opportunity with the Cowboys as an assistant coach, which paved the way for the Dragons to sign Anthony Griffin. Now, I've got to say that for the St. George Illawarra Dragons, that they've probably been the most disappointing club in the offseason in terms of their recruitment, in terms of how they've handled some of the media hype surrounding some of their players, and just some of their positional choices that they've made thus far. Well, getting into it, look, they've gained, as I said, Alvaro, who wasn't in the power side consistently last year, went off to the Warriors for a loan. Famau Wasili was also at the Warriors at one stage as well. Jack Bird is coming off another ACL injury, twice in 2 years, unfortunately. And Andrew Mccallick is probably the most intriguing signing so far. And I'll tell you why. Now, what's happening here is you've got Anthony Griffin here, who is wanting to try bring back the old boys. Wants to try bring back, the glory days of the Brisbane Broncos, with Mccallick, Hunt, Norman, and try to bring them all together. The problem I have here is that signing Andrew Mccallick on a 3-year deal is very dangerous. You got to consider the fact that he's 31 years old. He's ripped his hammy off the bone last year. It wasn't just a standard tear of the hammy. He ripped it off the bone completely. And they've signed him to a $1.6 million deal over 3 years. You've got Broncos covering $200,000 of the salary, so Dragons are paying $400 this year, and the next 2 years are $600. That's big money for a 31-year-old who's ripped his hammy off the bone. Now, the disappointing thing about all this is that I don't think they needed Andrew Mccallick. Now, you're all thinking, what do you mean? Cameron McInnes got injured, and, they needed someone to fill in. But let's hang on a second. The problem that the Dragons are having is that they've got Ben Hunt, who they've signed as a number 7, who should be playing number 9. There's no way around it. He should be playing number 9. We saw some games last year where he was fantastic at number 9. Just the way he could see the game, the way he envisioned everything to be. It was very good. Why they've gone and signed Andrew Mccallick, and look, no disrespect to Andrew Mccallick, he's a decent player and he's a workhorse for any club that, that he plays for, but he's at the back end of his career. Ben Hunt should be the one at 9. And then you've got kids like Jaden Sullivan who's coming through the ranks, that can partner, either Corey Norman in the halves. You know what I mean? I think that it was just a bit more smart in recruitment that the Dragons needed to do, and they weren't smart at all. And that's the problem. It's a big problem there, and unfortunately, the signings that they've made compared to who they've lost hasn't really made up for it. I see the Dragons as a team this year that will finish near the bottom, and I'm predicting they'll be the Wooden Spooners for 2021. But the problem is that the fact that they lost Cameron McInnes for next year, which is obviously a next year issue, but they've also lost him this year with his ACL injury. On top of all that, they've tried to cover it up with potentially signing Israel Folau And they were pretty advanced in their negotiations with Filau, and they were almost on the verge of signing him before they bowed down to the sponsors and they said, you know what, it's probably best you don't. And Dragons folded, like honestly, like cats. I'll be honest, they folded like idiots, and they decided, you know what, no, we're not going to pursue Israel Folau. All that to cover the fact that they lost McInnes for 4 years on a deal to the Sharks. It's disappointing. Anthony Griffin's already got a lot on his plate. We haven't even kicked the ball yet for round 1, and he's already got so much that he's got to worry about. But he's not really helping himself at the same time. Ben Hunt hasn't put in a decent season for the Dragons since he signed. A $1.2 million deal, $1.2 million a year for 5 years, which is $6 million, and a 6th year in his player option. That's $7.2 million of his salary cap has gone to Ben Hunt, and they've named him captain. I don't see the logic. The guy's under enough pressure as it is. Why are they putting him captain? And time will tell where there's a potential chance that, Hunt may lose that captaincy. He may not want it anymore because it's only going to cause him so much more issues and so many more problems down the track with him coaching. With him captaining the side. Look, now that they've signed Mccallick, can Griffin make them successful in a relevant side? No. Corey Norman has to go. $900,000 a year for what, really? He hasn't really lived up to the signing that the Dragons signed him for to replace Widdop. In fact, Widdop was a lot better, to be fair. With Ben Hunt at 7, which he should be at 9, the Dragons are gonna struggle this year. And some of their forwards who they've lost, they lost Frizzell, they lost Jacob Host, who I thought was gunning really well before he defected to the Rabbitohs. Even some power in Aitken. When he's on the field and when he's healthy, Aitken is very good. And they've replaced it with Jack Bird, who hasn't played an NRL game in 2 years. Andrew Mccallick, who, as I said, ripped his hammy off the bone. Daniel Alvaro, who couldn't get a run in at Para. And Famau Wasili, who isn't really proven as a first grader. It's going to be another tough year for the Dragons. And look, I'll be honest, it could be a few tough years. Once they start shedding a lot of these players that are on big money and start to recruit properly, they will be a force again. But they are, I believe, for the next few years, they'll be where the Bulldogs have been the last 4 years. Just in struggle street. And they're going to struggle to bring new recruits, and they're going to have to wait for these guys that are on big money to go before they start, making a difference in the club and start rebuilding properly. So, look, I don't see them succeeding this year. I don't see them doing too well. And I've got to say that they will struggle definitely with the lack of recruitment they've got, and they'll struggle with the combinations, and it'll just be another tough year for the Dragons. So they're predicted for me bottom last. Moving on to the next team, the team that always loves to finish 9th, which are the West Tigers. Now, they've signed some pretty handy signings. They've got Joe Offahengawi from the Broncos, Stefano Utoikamanu from the Eels, who they've now just announced captain James Tamo from the Penrith Panthers, James Roberts from the Rabbitohs, Dane Laurie from the Panthers as well, and Tuki Simpkins from the Cowboys. And they've lost quite a bit of players as well. They've lost a bit of experience. So they've lost Josh Aloiai, as we all know, to the Sea Eagles. Chris Lawrence has retired. Josh Reynolds is headed off to Hull Kingston Rovers. Harry Grant goes back to the Storm just after that deal finished with the loan. Paul Moborowski signed a deal with the Panthers as well. Benji Marshall, who was very clear that wasn't part of 2021 plans, has signed a 1-year deal with the Rabbitohs under Wayne Bennett. Chris McCrane's gone to the Huddersfield Giants. Elijah Taylor to the Salford Red Devils in the Super League. Robert Jennings as well with Paul Moborowski and Matt Eisenuth will go to the Panthers. Kane Bradley to the Cowboys. And last but not least, Sam McIntyre, who goes to the Gold Coast Titans. Now, Michael Maguire has made some pretty good signings. They've beefed up their front row big time, and they've even got some strike power in their backs as well. Dane Laurie, one I'm excited to see, and a player to watch for 2021, I believe. Just seeing how he went for Panthers in the few games he played last year. And look, I don't think he'll fit into gear right away. I do believe that in time he'll start to pick up with the more experience that he gets. Obviously, moving 6 weeks out from the NRL season, so I'm not expecting fireworks right now, but he's a player to watch. He's someone that really excites me. And even Stefano Toikamaru, a big signing from the Eels, and predicted to do big things for the Tigers, and on a decent contract there as well. So a lot to like about the recruits so far. Now, with the signings that they've made, can they be bound for the finals? I still don't think so. I've got to be real. There are still so many questions about their spine that they really haven't sorted out yet. Who's going to be their fullback? Will it be Moses Mbai, who's been training there all year? Or will it be this new kid, Dane Laurie? What about the halves? Luke Brooks will be number 7, but who's going to play number 6? Could it be Mbai potentially, or would it be Adam Dwayhe? Or would it be Jock Madden, who's just recently extended his deal as well? So, there are so many questions about that spine. And you know what? Even for, their hookers. You got Jacob Little, who is coming off a very serious ACL injury. And then you've got another kid on the bench, Jake Simpkins, who's been talked about as the next big thing. So how have they settled their spine? I think that's very important for the Tigers to know how they'll settle their spine. They've got some, as I said, they've signed James Roberts, who I'm really hoping he has a very good year for the Tigers. He's had a lot of interrupted years, playing for Broncos, even the Titans, and even at the Rabbitohs. He had a lot of time was interrupted, a couple of injuries he picked up as well. And he's obviously had a lot of issues surrounding his mental health, so he's hoping he has a gun year for them. But I'm expecting Roberts to have a big year. I want him to play every game this year. I'm expecting him to change the game just with his speed, and just how fast he is. He can break the line at any point in time. So the Tigers will be definitely looking to him to do that. And he's not young anymore. He's about 27, almost 28. This is the form where he should be in his career, where he should be really killing it. So I'm excited to see how the Tigers use James Roberts, partnered up with Michael Maguire once again. So that's going to be very intriguing to watch, seeing how he goes and keeping him out of the spotlight and making sure he's doing everything right to just, focus on his role at the Tigers and obviously help those kids coming through the ranks, be able to look up to him and just see just how good he can be. The biggest question that the Tigers have to ask themselves is Luke Brooks. He's been under the Benji Marshall shadow for way too long now. This is a year he has to step it up. He's played 150 plus games for the Tigers, but he has never dominated. They need him to fire. He must be the main man. If the Tigers are going to struggle with Brooks being the main man, then he's got to go. I really do think that for Brooks, it's a make or break year for him. I do believe that, with the way he's been playing as of recent times, it hasn't been up to the standards that the Tigers would have liked to think it would have been up to. So he has a lot to do. And it's his team now. He's got no more Benji Marshall. He's got no more experience in the halves to kind of help him out. This is his team now. So he's got to lead this team. He's got to be talking more. He's got to lead by example. And he's got to get this team into the finals. Will they make the finals? I don't think so. I still think they're another year or two away before Maguire really shapes and molds his side before they can start really contending for the title. So it's going to be a inconsistent year for the Tigers like it was last year. I'm expecting them to finish, unfortunately 9th or 10th. But they've just got to trust the process. They've got to hang in there. They've got to do everything right. They've got to work hard. And they've got to just trust what they're doing and trust in Maguire because, Michael Maguire's won a comp at the Rabbitohs. He's a very good coach. And he's even had some success being the New Zealand coach as well. So they just need to buy into what he's trying to do there for the Tigers to kind of have any sort of success in the future at the club. So that's my take on the West Tigers. I don't see him making the finals, but look very intrigued to see how they'll go, especially some of their new signings, Tamo and Offa Hengawi and even James Roberts. Moving on to the third team, New Zealand Warriors. Now, they've made quite a few signings here. And they've lost a little bit as well, but they've made some decent signings. They've beefed up their front row. Signings of Adam Fanua-Blake from the Sea Eagles and Ben Murdoch-Masila from the Warrington Wolves from Super League are big deals. I reckon these are two good players that can carry this forward pack, this young forward pack for the Warriors and carry them into what could be a potentially very good year for them. They've got Bailey Simmons from the Rabbitohs, Iliesa Ratuva from Rugby Union, Kane Evans from Parramatta Eels, so another forward there. And then they beefed up their back. So they've signed Ewan Aiken from the Dragons, they've signed Marcelo Montoya from the Bulldogs, and they've signed Sean O'Sullivan from the Brisbane Broncos. Now, they've lost Adam Blair, who's officially retired. Tane Milne has gone to the Rabbitohs. Lachlan Burr signed with the Cowboys, as you guys know. Adam Kieran has signed a 2-deal with the Roosters. Isaiah Papali'i and Nathaniel Roach have signed with the Eagles. Patrick Herbert is headed to the Titans. King Vuniyayawa is actually now at Leeds. Ignatius Parsi at St. Helens and Lehava Pulu, who was initially released, is now on a train and trial contract with the Brisbane Broncos. Another club with a new coach. Nathan Brown will be the one taking the reins for the Warriors over the next 3 years, and you've got Phil Good there as the head of football and kind of just trying to manage everything to see, just to ensure some success off the field for the Warriors, while Nathan Brown will be focusing on the field for their success. Now, I just got to take a look at this side quickly. Now, Nathan Brown, it's a bit of a crazy option to go with him, considering his stint at Newcastle wasn't really the best stint. And the deal he signed at the time was kind of like a performance deal. So even if they had won the grand final and they could have sacked him and he was happy with that, I think it's pretty stupid, to be quite honest. But look, it's a new club. They've made, as I said, some very decent signings. And I can potentially see these guys making the finals. I'm still on the fence with this one. I've got to be honest, They've still got some very good players. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who's been the main man for the last few years. It will be his last year before he heads over to rugby union. So another big year we're expecting from Roger Tuivasa-Sheck. But their halves are going to be the most interesting. It's where they're going to struggle a lot for their depth. Sean O'Sullivan, isn't really proven to be a regular first grader at the moment. They've got their halves in Cody Nikorima and Chanel Harris-Tavita. Looking forward to seeing how both of those players go. They did well last year towards the back end of the year and had a bit of success with the side. But now they've spent the whole year together. They've spent the whole preseason together and practicing and training and getting it all right for this season. So I'm excited to see how they'll work with their new recruits. Now, look, I do think they can make the finals, but it just depends on them being healthy. And they've got this mentality where I feel like they can just be very lazy at times. Hoping that's not the case this year. Adam Fanua-Blake can play 60, 65 minutes. Murdoch Masila can play some big minutes as well. And having someone like Kane Evans, who I thought did really well off the bench last year for the Parramatta Eels, will look to bring that experience into the club there as well. So I'm excited to see some of these players rip up and just to see how they go this year. But look, the real question is, can those big boppers stay healthy and be the difference makers? Yeah, definitely. I see them improving a lot last year, especially with their go forward in the experience that they've got now as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the Warriors go this year. But look, I'm expecting a lot better from them than they had last year. Obviously, they're going to be sacrificing the first couple of months being in the Central Coast, which, once again, thank you guys so much. But the biggest thing that they have the issue with is that they can't win many games away from their stadium in New Zealand. So it's going to be another tough year for them. But if they adapt and they aren't really sort of locked into that sort of bubble that they've been in for the last little while, I'm sure that they'll do fine and they'll do really well. So looking forward to seeing how some of these players will go and just being a difference for the Warriors this year. Last but not least, that we're covering is a team that finished 9th in 2020, the Gold Coast Titans. Have some really decent signings that they've made, and they're a team that have gotten out of that really rough patch and now are looking finals bound. They've signed David Fifita from the Brisbane Broncos, Tino Fa'asuamaleaui from the Melbourne Storm, Sam McIntyre from the Tigers, Herman Sasa from the Knights, and Patrick Herbert from the New Zealand Warriors. These are the guys that they've brought into the club, and some really decent signings there, especially in the forwards. Now, they've lost Ryan James to the Canberra Raiders. Jai Arrow, I believe, the biggest loss to the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Shannon Boyd has retired. Bryce Cartwright has gone to the Eels with Keegan Hipgrave as well. Dale Copley is headed back to the Broncos. Young Tonu Mapea, who's a big loss as well, is now playing in rugby union for the Brumbies. And the other two players, Tyrone Roberts and Nathan Peets, were released and are both without clubs. Can the Titans continue their form from the back end of last season? Look, I do think they can. And I can explain to you why. Now, the Gold Coast Titans dominated the last 5 games of the year. Why? Because Jamal Fogarty was running the whole show, which allowed Ash Taylor just to play a simple game. And they had this to go forward as well. They've got some very good depth in their forwards as well. I thought Tyrone Peachy started to play a lot better towards the second half of the year. He'll need to pick up and be at another level this year. You've got these two signings here, David Fifita and Tino Fa'asuamaleaui. They're big signings for the club. Especially Fifita, on a big contract as well, and will have a lot to prove. But especially for Fa'asuamaleaui, especially the fact that he's just won a premiership with the Storm. So that experience, even as a 21-year-old, that he's going to take back home to the Titans is huge. So I'm expecting very big things from this forward pack. Fifita, Fa'asuamaleaui, Herman Sasa, Moeaki Fotuaika. These guys will need to lift week in, week out, and they will be the difference makers in having this team go in the finals. And I'd like to think they'll make the top 8 and go a bit deeper in the finals. Now, the questions around David Fifita are being asked, can he be that same game changer he was for the Brisbane Broncos? Yeah, he can. that try he scored against the Cowboys, I think it was in the first round or second round of last year, was huge. It was a great try. You know, he broke the line from 45 meters out, a couple of steps, and then stepped Valentine Holmes at the end. You know, he's an impact player. He can break the line. He's going to be very good for the Titans, and I see him having a very good year for them. And just making sure he's good off the field, which will obviously go a long way as well. Now, another question they have is Ash Taylor. You know, Ash Taylor, it's on his last year of $1 million deal. He's looking to stay. He knows he isn't worth the money that he's been signed for. I do think Ash Taylor would stay, and I think he should stay. You know, with what Justin Holbrook has been building over at the Titans, I do see Ash Taylor as a big part of their plans. We need to sacrifice a bit of money, of course, but Ash Taylor last year, his last 5-6 games last year was fantastic. It was about time as well, you know. He even played with groin injuries and shoulder injuries as well. So, yeah, I think it was even issues with his hip. So, look, with Ash Taylor being 100% ready to go, I'm expecting big things from him this year, just in his running game, just to allow Fogarty to do what he needs to do to guide the side around. And I'm expecting to see the Titans go deep in the top 8. I'm looking at maybe 6th, even potentially, as crazy it may sound, even 5th. So looking forward to seeing that, and looking just to see how the Titans team gel with their with most of their backs still there, and even that strikeout wide with Patrick Herbert. Looking forward to seeing what he can do. But there's a player there that they've had for a little while who's come from the Parramatta Eels, Greg Mazu. Now, his initial name was Greg Lele-Sueo, but he's changed the name to Greg Mazu. Now, he's a freak of a player. I've been watching him for many years, back at Parramatta Eels in the New South Wales Cup, and he is dynamite. He's ready for a first-grade debut. So he's my player to watch for 2021 as well. I'm excited to see him go out and just be his dominant self. But he'll be definitely a difference maker for the Gold Coast Titans this year. So, and he's another player that I'm really looking forward to see just take his game to another level and finally make his debut. Guys, thank you so much for joining me on another great episode of League Chat with the Stat. Thanks for joining me on part 2 of the 4-part series that we're trying to cover prior to round 1. Now, guys, just so you know, like you do already, we are all over our social media platforms in Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So continue to share it around, like the page, subscribe to YouTube, share it around to all your friends and family. You know, we've got some big things planned this year for 2021, so I'm really excited. I've created a tipping comp. So on tips.com.au, I've created a tipping comp. Let us know if you're really keen, and we'll chuck in the league code in the description below. One last thing as well, we have actually made a Supercoach comp as well. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from me in terms of Supercoach as the rounds go on. And we're going to be rolling out a Supercoach competition as well, all for free, both tipping and Supercoach comps for free. So looking forward to have you guys, you know, be part of it. If you guys can beat me in tipping, which I think most likely you could, and if you guys can beat me in Supercoach, you know, that'll be very interesting to watch. So looking forward to be able to interact with you guys through those platforms as well. And as you all know, we're all over our podcasting streams. Guys, once again, thank you very much for joining me. We'll see you for the next episode in part 3 of the 4-part series into the 2021 season previews. Have a good one, guys. Take care.